Well, we will kick things off. I'm Devin Waugh, the instruction librarian for NC Live, and this webinar is the Facilitation Librarian Collaborative Conversations for Building Community. And our webinar facilitator today is Angel Truesdale, who's the Social Sciences and Business Librarian at UNC Charlotte. Previously, she had worked as an adult services librarian at Charlotte Mecklenburg Library System. And so I will have Angel take it away.
All right, thanks, Devin. And I just realized I somehow cannot find the chat. So please interject if there's any questions or anything, Devin, please let me know. But yes, welcome everyone. I'm Angel Truesdale, like Devin said. I'm the Social Sciences and Business Librarian at UNC Charlotte. I've been there actually about 7 years now, which is crazy to say. And previously, I was at Charlotte Mecklenburg Library for 8 years. So I'm celebrating 15 years in libraries. And so I'm really excited to discuss and share some of the facilitation skills that I have gained and learned throughout this presentation. I really feel like facilitation has really helped me kind of frame and discuss things in a different way than I did before I kind of learned some of these techniques. So I do want to talk a little bit about like my background and training. So I talked about being at the public library, and now I'm at an academic library. And so what I did when I was at the public library, I was fortunate enough that Charlotte Mecklenburg Library supported me going through a training program that culminated at ALA in 2017. So I went through the library's Transforming Communities Models for Change, Dialogue, and Deliberation. Um, I guess training program. It was online, and then there was a half day in-person training at that ALA conference. That was my first one. And I have a lot of links in my presentation, so just bear with me. And I did highlight three of the organizations they worked with. I highlighted these because I don't have them linked in anywhere else in my presentation, but there were so many more organizations they worked with. So the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation, Everyday Democracy, and the Harwood Institute for Public Innovation. I think I actually do have a link for the Harwood Institute a little bit later. I also got some training and was a part of a initiative called On the Table Charlotte. It went for about 3 or 4 years where we discussed different things in Charlotte, like segregation and belonging. And so that was a good experience for me. And that's this picture you see here. This is at the main library in Uptown, which I worked for about 4 years before transitioning to UNC Charlotte. This is one of the discussions we have on the table Charlotte. And then most recently, about a year ago, I took a training program with the Collaborative Discussion Project, which is by the Interactivity Foundation. So I'm always learning, I'm always developing my facilitation skills, and I really want to develop this for other people too. So definitely want to share this with as many people as I can. And so I have at the bottom here, finding the right resource and activity can make a world of difference. So I have a lot of activities as examples in here, and all of these resources have many, many more that you can choose from. All right, so here's some learning objectives. This was in the description of the workshop today. And so I want to transition folks from being information providers to facilitators of meaningful, productive conversations. Hopefully you'll gain some practical facilitation tools that ensures that every voice is heard and valued. I think that that's really key, whether you're talking with someone individually or group, even larger in a classroom, what have you. I really hope that you come away with some tips here today. And then there are some intentional strategies in here. So I do have, like I said, some examples of activities and different things you could try to see if that might work for you in your different situations. All right, let's jump into it. I do have a lot, so I'm going to try to make sure I keep an eye on time. So framing the conversation. So I wanted to talk about framing just a little bit. I'm going to use a lot of different terms here that are facilitation based, but I'll try to define them as I can. And I did want to kind of frame our conversation and kind of put us on the same page as to what facilitation is. And this is a definition I kind of cobbled together from different sources, different places that I feel like is the definition that I use. It's the practice of guiding a participatory process to help individuals achieve common goals without dominating the discussion. So, as a facilitator, you are not dominating the discussion. You are helping to listen, move the conversation along, be a part of it for sure, but hopefully you're not talking the entire time. The facilitator listens actively, seeks to clarify concepts, fill informational gaps as you see fit, as you know or have knowledge of, and manages the overall flow of the conversation. So again, depending on what setting you're in, hopefully you're able to kind of manage the room and bring it back to the overall purpose that you had. All right. So what do we start with? A lot of people have maybe already heard this, but ground rules and agreements. To me, this is an activity that really helps, especially in situations where you have a lot of various different opinions and perspectives and point of views, which a lot of us do. No one person is alike, right? And no one person may feel the exact same about a particular topic or issue or conversation. So I pulled this from the Leading Conversations in Small and Rural Libraries document that ALA had developed in the Transforming Communities guide. So this is just one of the guides they have, and this was one that they did for small and rural libraries. And these are again from some of the organizations they worked with. So Conversation Cafe is really great. So open-mindedness, discovery, brevity. So go for honesty and depth, but don't go on and on. That might be something that's really important for you, especially if you're on a time crunch. There's also living room conversations. Be curious and open to learning. I think it's really good to kind of set that framework for everybody to make sure that we're here to learn. We're here to actively listen. We're trying to make sure that we come to an understanding of each other, and that everyone is on the same page as to at least how we approach things. We may not have the same opinions, but at least coming to the table, coming to the conversation, we are on the same page about what.
Hey, Angel, did your sound just cut out? Oh,
Yes. Okay.
okay,
So
cool.
can you hear me
You're good.
now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I've been having some technical difficulties today, y'all. So I'm so sorry about that. Bear with me. Um, about the living room conversation, ground rules. Oh, hold on. Okay. Okay. Hold on, y'all. I'm so sorry. Okay. All right. I hope that. Can you hear me, Devin?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay.
All good.
And then just one other organization.
Oh, you're cutting out again. I don't know why. It might be your headphones.
Okay. Okay. I'm just gonna let's take these off.
Yeah, let's see.
All right. I hope y'all don't hear any background noise. Okay. All right. Is that pretty good now?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to point out for the one from the National Issues Forums ground rules that's really good is that the moderator will guide the discussion but remain neutral. I think it's really good to put a framing in there for the actual facilitator or moderator to actually be a part of the ground rules as to what their role is. And I do think it's very important to discuss what your role is as a facilitator as well. Okay. All right, so here is one thing I like to point out, the art of the pause. There may be some situations in conversations, discussions where um, you know,
something may be shocking, something may be surprising, or something may land very heavy. And that is the time to take a pause. Don't ever be afraid to interject and say, let's sit with this. Let's take a moment. I have a sample phrase here. Let's take 30 seconds of silence just to think about that last point before we respond. The art of the pause is really good in facilitation and it just obviously like everyday life because if you need to take a moment, if you need to take a beat to make sure that you're digesting, you're understanding what's happening, and that you really want to try to form what you're going to say next, I think that that's very important. And so I like to imbue mindfulness in everything that I do. And so you could even potentially put in a breathing exercise or putting in something that might seem right in the moment. And you can prepare this beforehand just to have as like a backup or just to have in your pocket, in your toolkit. But taking a moment just to even do like, deep breaths in and out and then come back to the moment. And then open it back up. But again, with maybe some framing and perspective, I think it's really good. The other quote I put or phrase I put on here is something to make sure that we're including all the voices in the room. You may take a pause there because you might have somebody dominating the conversation, or you may be going on a tangent. There's something that, okay, we're not on track to the purpose and the goals of our meeting, of our conversation. So you could have this as something you prepared to say, I feel responsible for making, as a facilitator, I feel responsible for making sure everyone is heard, but I also have to keep the meeting on track. So that is one thing where if you're on a tangent or you feel like maybe some people are dominating, you may be able to frame or put that out into the room and see how people respond there as well. So some good stuff there, hopefully to make sure that you're helping the conversation along. So I like to highlight that pause. All right, here's some sample phrases. So again, trying to move from, just talking and talking and talking about something and, really inspiring people to speak up. So I'm not going to say everything here, but I do like this second one we have. Can you give an example to help me understand that better? So you might be confused, or you might feel like other people in the room are confused, just body language, their faces. And so you might want to, or you might want someone to expand a little further because it might be a controversial statement they just made. So saying, give me an example really helps that person kind of think back to and, think about what they're saying. And I like, it seems that we all agree that X is a priority. Where do we differ on how to get there? So actually acknowledging the differences in the room really does help because I feel like that's when some of those voices that people who aren't speaking up, that's when hopefully a phrase like that will inspire them to say, hey, I disagree, or hey, I'm feeling differently about that. Can we work through this conversation or this part? So again, trying to pull out from people who may not be speaking up or who feel like they aren't being heard in the conversation. I do have two on this right-hand side here to customize, right? So I tried to bring out some phrases that might be good for you to use in your library. So let's treat, if you're thinking internally, let's treat our library as a collaborative workspace where our individual insights can help us move toward a common goal for our team. So that might be a good framing statement to say at the beginning of a meeting or a conversation. And then the second one is could be an external conversation or phrase you use as a library community. Let's use our unique perspectives to move from individual ideas towards shared solutions for our neighborhood. So again, it's coming back to a common goal and agreement, maybe going back to our group agreements, our group guidelines, basically saying we want to bring it back to solutions. We want to be action oriented. And I did have a note at the top here that while the language may seem clinical, so I was reading through these and I was, working through my presentation and I was like, some people may feel like, oh, are you trying to be a therapist or trying to be a health professional, but really it's really just to kind of put people at ease and let them know that you understand them, that you heard them, that you're actively listening. So again, think of yourself as a collaborative guide or a learning partner. So we're all here to learn together. And what are libraries if we're not promoting lifelong learning? So let's get into some scenarios now. Facilitating meetings. I would be remiss if I did not talk about a 2021 facilitation webinar that I did for NC Live on tips and techniques for facilitating meetings online. So we were thrust into the pandemic. This actually may have been 2020. I can't remember now, but 2020, 2021, I did a whole hour about facilitating online meetings. So I pulled some of those things out here again, and just, added a little few things. But if you want an entire hour on how to facilitate meetings, definitely check out that webinar. But I like to plan meetings with backwards planning. So what is my purpose? What is my goal? What do I want to come out of the meeting with, right? So I work my way back from there. Use timestamps. I think for so many people, it is so great to say, oh, we only have 5 minutes to discuss this topic. Knowing ahead of time in the agenda how much time we have to spend on a topic really does help you as a facilitator, as the leader, but it also helps other people who are attending to know, okay, I need to make sure that I discuss, X, Y, and Z in a certain amount of time. Ask for volunteers and assign roles that include more people in the process. So this might be one way to include someone who doesn't speak up that often. They could potentially be the note taker, a co-facilitator, or even like a project manager or someone who's going to implement some of your action items. And that might help them kind of break out of their shell a little bit. If they're the note taker, they might be like, oh, hey, I want to understand or clarify something we said that would be an action item. Or who was the one who said this particular statement? So that may involve more people in the process and, make sure that we're co-creators, we're learning together. Be transparent in your agenda. If someone is speaking, if there is something I always believe you should not have that many surprises in your meetings. People should know what they're coming into. So be as transparent as you can. Just a couple of things, facilitations, icebreakers and energizers. So I am a huge fan of this. These do not have to be personal. I know we're in our professional settings here, and a lot of people think icebreakers are going to make me talk about my childhood dreams and stuff like that. They do not have to be that. They can be customized to be about your position in the library, your work that you're doing. And energizers are pretty much the same as icebreakers. You're just doing them like midway or toward the end of the meeting to kind of get people, thinking and acting in the session. And energizers are really good to kind of like get people up and moving if you like to. I mean, you can do that with an icebreaker as well, but it's really good to kind of go, all right, let's stand up for 5 minutes and have, pair off with people to talk about this or that. Invoke the parking lot. Hopefully you've heard of this before, but in meetings, conversations, if we get off topic and we feel like, okay, there's no resolution to this topic, let's put it in the parking lot. Let's talk about it in another meeting, or let's talk about it at the end if we have time. And I have a phrase here that is a vital point, but it's a bit outside our goal for today. Can I park it here on the board so we don't lose it? So using a whiteboard or other means might be good there. I did want to put the unconference model in here. I went to a workshop where it was an unconference model where you create an agenda on the spot, rather than having a pre-planned schedule. So you have maybe a theme and you do maybe have a goal of what you want to accomplish there, but you don't have a set agenda. I do think this can be effective, but make sure it is very clear as to what people are expected to do when they get there. All right, next one-on-one. I think for one-on-one conversations, I think about, talking to your manager, or other conversations with your colleagues. I think it's always good to prepare, if you can, depending on the topic. So agree on the topics, agree on the goals, and again, have no surprises, right? So make sure you're emailing each other to go, this is what I want to talk about. I think it's also good to go in with talking points, some bullet points that says, I want to talk about one, two, three. I even have had people, and I've suggested to people, develop some scripted lines when you have a crucial conversation. So if you're going in to talk about a promotion or a raise, or maybe you're struggling or having a conversation about something that an issue you need to address, sometimes having some of those phrases or scripted lines really can help. Framing is key. At the beginning of the meeting, maybe reiterate those goals, those agreements. Definitely figure out like, okay, so this is what we're here to talk about, right? Like affirm that that's what you're here for. And I think that that really helps set the tone, because if you're supposed to be meeting about one thing and a person just like jumps off into something else, you can kind of bring it back like, hey, at the beginning of the meeting, we said we were going to talk about this. So again, that's really good. And then in with next steps, I try to be action-based, solution-oriented, and have maybe this as one of the phrases that or scripted lines that you want to say toward the end of the meeting. What is one thing we both agree needs to happen next? And maybe, build in some time. Like, I want to say this with 15 minutes left to go in the meeting. So what is one thing we both agree needs to happen next? And then follow up with a summary email. If there's anything that can be beneficial, especially with one-on-one, is go, here's what we discussed in our meeting. Do you agree? Or is this something, that's great for meetings, right? Having the notes and everything. And it's great for one-on-one conversations as well, because it's like it's a written record of what you talked about, instead of just having that kind of verbal, all right, trying to remember what you talked about, and or even relying on your own notes. Put it in an email, and that way you're both agreeing to what was discussed and what those next steps are. All right, so I pulled this out. I took a crucial conversations training while I was at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library with our county government. And I pulled this out. This is the only resource in here that's not a link to a web page. It's a download. But I thought it was a good kind of guide, framing guide for having crucial conversations. Crucial conversations are kind of those conversations I was talking about earlier, where you may need to bring up an issue. You may need to talk about something that's concerning you about a coworker, or you really need to say something about your manager that's not easy for you. So I like the framing and the suggestions that they make here. Reverse your thinking, change your emotions. I think with the changing emotions, that's really good, is try to see others as reasonable, rational, and decent human beings. When we're talking to colleagues, when we're talking to other people, assume good intentions. Assume that whatever behavior or comments or concerns you may have, that you at the very least are colleagues, this is your manager, and you both want good things for each other. So I think that that's really good, and try to like regulate your emotions as much as you can. That emotional intelligence piece is really good in situations where you're having these conversations. Make others feel safe. I think that that's really good. Psychological safety is really good, because they may think you're coming in, they may make assumptions that you're not making, but they may make assumptions about you. And if you go, hey, I just want to have a conversation about this. No, no preconceived notions. I really want to listen and hear what you have to say. I won't even talk for 10 minutes. Making that determination really does help people kind of go, okay, maybe my assumptions were wrong, and then invite dialogue, right? So this is a conversation back and forth. We're learning together. Make sure that you are communicating what you need to get across. But make sure that it's a back and forth and you're not just talking to people like I am right now. So I put at the bottom perspective, respect, and learn. I think that that's one thing to keep in mind, especially with these one-on-one conversations. All right, so that's an activity. All right, in your library, right? So one of the things that I like to do, especially for new employees coming into libraries that have never worked in libraries before, is role play. So having some scenarios, some case studies that people can work through is really great, right? So be as prepared as possible in practice, especially when you're talking about conversations with patrons. Like I said, I worked at the main library, the Uptown libraries in Charlotte. And so we had some some patrons sometimes that, would communicate very difficult life situations to you. Like, I need to apply for SNAP benefits, or I need to do this, and I don't know how to work my smartphone or my computer. And so having these role play scenarios and kind of working through what you might say to someone when they are in that situation can really help. And this could be good for people who have been in the profession 10, 20 years, as well as new folks. Check for understanding and build consensus with colleagues and patrons. So get on the same page and come to an agreement together. So I can help you on the computer for a couple minutes, but I do have to go back to the desk to help others. But come to the desk and ask me any additional questions you may have. So leave that door open, but make sure, and then, say, do you agree or do you understand that that's the process? You don't have to be as formal as I was just now, but I think that that really reinforces that collaboration. We're agreeing together and even co-creation, right? So I'm going to help you and you're going to help me by telling me when you need additional help. I want to obviously, as a librarian, talk about the reference interview. So at the service desk and with others, it's really just good to ask those clarifying questions. So you may just assume, all right, I need help with this, is, what a patron is saying or a colleague is saying. Ask some clarifying questions first. Okay, this is what I'm hearing. Is this right, what you need? What resources have you already consulted? Where are you coming from? And or just define that for me. What are you, I may not understand what you're talking about, so give me a definition. And don't just be like, I know what they're talking about, I think. And I think in these conversations, be considerate and compassionate. I'm saying a lot of different things, and they are going to transcend, right? So these conversations, these tips are going to be great for one-on-one. They're going to be great in your community. They're going to be great in learning situation, learning environments. So I'm not just saying this, for one thing. These tips are going to be applicable to several different scenarios, situations. Okay, so here's an activity you can do from the collaborative discussion project that I really like. This is something that can bring your team together. It's the pre-work is on the left-hand side, so determining your discussion style. These are some really great questions for a new manager coming into a team to ask. Or if you plan to have more conversations in your library, if there's some services changing, if there's some roles changing, positions changing, it's kind of good to kind of set this like, would you describe yourself as an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert? So you know who's in the room. You're like, okay, this person, and if you're not aware, ambivert means a mix of introvert and extrovert. So this person has described himself as an introvert. So I need to be aware of that person in the room so that I can maybe pull some things out of them or include them more, or make sure I'm just kind of addressing the conversation to everyone. Let's hear from everyone about this topic, because I really want everyone's voice heard about how to move forward with this particular service or thing. Some other good things when participating in a group discussion, what do you most frequently fear? That might be good to know about the team and the community that you're going into. So what are their fears? What are they kind of like, I don't want to talk about? So this could be in a Google form, a pre-survey that you send out before you have the discussion while they're registering for the discussion or what have you. And I think the other question that's really good is, what are some tips, tricks to help you bring your best and most authentic self to the discussion? So having people bring and feel comfortable getting that psychological safety themselves to the conversation is what pulls out people out of their shell, breaks them out of like, oh, they might not be confident about what they want to say, or the phrasing that they may want to make or something. So I think asking that question again helps you kind of determine how you may want to frame some of the questions and activities that you do in the discussion. On the right-hand side here, this is an activity from the Collaborative Discussion Project. Both of these are from the Collaborative Discussion Project. And it's designing a kitchen. And there's several different steps to it. And this can be an icebreaker or an energizer activity during a longer session. But it really helps you, it helps people in small groups or as a larger group kind of determine how they want to design a kitchen and how they will work together to make those decisions together. And so bringing people even out of like the scenario that you may interact with at the library may help you see this is how people process information. This is how people discuss how they want to design things and how they approach things. So I thought that activity was good as well. On the bottom here under more ideas, I just have a link to the reference section of AOA, their kind of reference interview. They have an appendix of these wonderful, great questions for what to ask in the reference interview. So I thought that that was really good to use there too. Okay, in your community. So I like to tell people treat outreach as an ongoing practice. When you connect with a community member or connect with an organization, that should be a lasting relationship. That should be a partnership that is ongoing. So you're not just visiting them once. You're not just having this one-time interaction with them. It should be ongoing. And so when I'm saying that, I really want to stress be consistent and build a team. So hopefully in doing outreach, you're not a one-person team. If you are, let's try to get you some help. Let's get some folks in there, maybe in a volunteer or something to help you out. But that's a really good practice to me because that's when your partners, your community organizations really start to utilize your skills and your library when it comes to resources, right? Research as a foundation. So I was talking about this a little bit earlier. I don't want you dominating the conversation. But when it comes to talking about different issues, like I mentioned earlier, we were talking about segregation in Charlotte and how that has evolved over time. It's really good to know demographic information, how segregation has changed over time that has been published in, maybe research articles or books or, pamphlets that has been published by the county or the city. So having research and backing up certain statements that you're making, those framing statements or, other things that you want to interject, having research and background information is really good to kind of say, so you talked about the demographics or the, ethnic and racial background of the city. Let me give you some facts and figures about what our demographics look like in Charlotte, in Raleigh, in Cary, in Asheville, in Wilmington. So I think that's really good there. It helps to move the conversation along as well. So when there are some quiet moments, people aren't speaking up, you can maybe go back to your facts and figures, your demographics, your research and say, all right, let's talk about hey, we've seen that redlining has happened, started at some point and has actually bled into this. So that can actually help you kind of move the discussion along and maybe talk about the next evolution in the conversation. I like having a learning object. So a handout, any calls to action, ways to be involved. Maybe you're looking to have volunteers in your library. Maybe you're looking to get people to give you feedback on a resource or a service. So have something that you take with you into the community. Involve a community member in planning. So if you're trying to pull out voices that may be unheard in the community who probably are like, what is the library doing? I don't really want to engage, or it doesn't seem like it might be beneficial. Bring somebody from the community into your planning. If they see somebody who's their next door neighbor or somebody they know, they may be more inclined to go like, oh, okay, Rob is helping the library organize that. They're helping this person. Okay, they're not an outsider. They're someone who's a part of my community. And I feel like I can be a part of this conversation now because I know Rob. And then you can maybe utilize a speakers list. This can be, again, for any of these scenarios, these situations. So a lot of people, or I think the old conventional way was to talk about a talking stick, right? So having a talking stick was good for folks to say, all right, you speak now. You speak now. You speak now. I think a speakers list is a little bit better framing for conversation. So if you have someone dominating or if you have a topic that you want to hear from, you have people sign up to speak. So this may look similar, or if you're thinking about like a county or city council meeting or school board meeting, they have a speakers list. This is kind of the similar thing where you have a list of people that's predetermined in a certain order to talk about the particular issue at hand. All right. So here is a sample email or conversation starter that you can use in outreach to increase engagement. And again, it's using certain language so that people feel included. They feel like you're adding them as a part of the conversation. So I think that the Living Room Conversations does this really well here. What they do is they outline clearly there's going to be 4 to 6 people in our group. It's not a debate, and the goal is not to change one another's opinions. We want people to listen and be curious, show respect, and suspend judgment. And I think the really good thing here is that it ends with your perspective would be a great addition to the conversation. I'd be happy to talk through any other details, and I hope you can join us. So here's a sample email or invitation, something you can send out in your community to kind of get those people pulled in that they might be like community conversation, or you want to hear from me about story time or something. I think having this framing or having this kind of short but detailed account of what you expect and what you hope and what your goals are in the conversation, this can help people go, okay, this is what it's about. And then I have 2 links at the bottom here, that this Rooted in Connection Libraries Designed for Belonging Community. It's about kind of how people have used living room conversations and other tools in libraries. And then the ACTS exercise from the Harwood Institute and ALA. It's really good. It has a series of questions you can kind of get to thinking about community involvement. All right, we're coming through this. Okay, so in the classroom, in a workshop, in a program, here is what we can do to kind of facilitate conversations there. Learning objectives. So I started this workshop, this presentation with learning objectives. Going into it, people should know, what am I here to learn? What should I be getting out of this? It should be clear what people are showing up for, right? So again, no surprises. I think moving beyond the lecture into dialogue, I broke this rule with this presentation. I was telling Devin this. I did not build a lot of interactivity into this, interactive elements into this. I feel like I'm lecturing to you, and I apologize that I didn't kind of think through that a little bit more. I wasn't deliberate about that, but we'll have questions at the end, of course. So move from lecturing to dialogue. So again, not just being an information provider, but being in dialogue with each other, that we're learning together. I may have a level of expertise, but you also have a level of expertise. Active learning strategies, walk around the room, give them a chance to interact and work with the material that you're sharing with them, that you're teaching them. And then ask questions throughout to gauge understanding. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Do you need more time, or do I need to spend more time on this? Definitely asking questions and just at least checking in with people really helps as well. And I kind of said this a little bit earlier, but inspire learning by helping others recognize and apply their own knowledge and values. So you have your expertise, they also have expertise, and we're learning together. We're conversating together. And then break down information into manageable chunks. If there's one thing I hope that you can do in the classroom, in a workshop, in a presentation, in a program, is to make sure that you're, coming at this assuming they don't have any prior knowledge. So A 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, B, so breaking that up into manageable chunks really helps. And what you can do is you can prepare those manageable chunks. And then when you get in the room, if you've done a pre-survey, if you see that people are a little bit more intermediate or advanced, then you can kind of go, all right, we can speed through this and have much more time to kind of have a conversation or interact with the resources that we're looking at. All right. So one of the things that I really like that I came across is the snowballing effect. So people may have heard of think, pair, share. So think about the topic or think about the information I'm providing, pair up with someone one-on-one, just want two people, and then share out with each other and just the two people there. That's really great to do so that people who are those introverted people who are a little bit afraid to speak up in the larger group can at least have some type of interactivity in the meeting or the program, the classroom, the instruction session. So that's really good. So people know, think, pair, share. That's pretty commonplace. But I like this snowballing where you take people out of their pairs. So you pair them up, and then you have two more, another pair up. So there's four people. And again, these numbers you can mix and match depending on who's in the room. And then those four folks pair up and go with another group that's four until you kind of have the whole class talking, right? So depending on your topic or what you're explaining, this just kind of helps people go, all right, these people feel this way. And then we're continuing the conversation here. And then they're also having conversation there. So actually doing snowballing, I think it's a really good way to kind of see this progression of different people and what they're saying. And that way we get a lot of different perspectives in the room, and then we bring it all back together. So I think that's really great there. All right, so I'm going to talk about something that I am passionate about. I have been the secretary on two nonprofit boards, and note taking is a little bit of a skill I've developed over time to try to think about what are the important points. What do people need to know? What do we need to follow up on? What action steps? What's our action plan? What do we need to implement now, in 3 months, 6 months? Really defining what's next in the process. After we meet, we come together, we have our community discussion. I'm meeting with my manager, or I'm talking to a colleague or a patron. So, note taking is the community agreement you have with each other. This is where you go, all right, this is what we talked about, and this is what we agreed to do. It defines your action plan, it defines how you're going to move forward and your next steps. So, note taking is really important. And again, if you are the facilitator, if you're leading the conversation, the meeting, ask someone to play that role. Tell them what you expect in the notes. Ask them to ask clarifying questions throughout the meeting or the conversation to say, okay, is this the next step? Is this the action item we need to follow up on? And who is assigned to this particular next step? So this validates voices in the room because it also talks to, or it is a written record of what people have said and what we all agreed to. So I think it actually reinforces what people have said. And if they see their comments in the notes, they go, okay, I really was heard. I feel like I was heard. And so I have a link here for what is collaborative learning. It's an activity that's really good with kind of coming up with what you might want to talk about when you're deciding on shared goals and note taking and what you think it's important to highlight. So I think that's really good. And then I always like one of the resources that ALA used that opened up my world was the World Cafe. Opened up my world was the World Cafe. This was to discuss different cultural issues in roundtables. And one thing that they like to have in their conversations is a graphic recorder. So you may not always have someone who is an artist, but if you do, or if this is another role that someone can play, I have an example of someone who has taken notes, but it's a visual. So this one is good about kind of highlighting what they're doing in quarter one, quarter two, what's important to them. You might be able to see the word communication here. You're thinking about like, okay, what specific actions can I take to mobilize your organization, your team, yourself? And this is just great for especially people who like a visual. So, having a Google Doc or other documents with just a list of action items and notes may not be as engaging as this graphic recording you have here. So whether it's a digital whiteboard, or in-person whiteboard that you take a picture of, or it is something that is a little bit more animated. I found a bunch of graphic recordings where people are doing with actual clip art and things like that and icons. So doing it digitally is something that people are doing. I'm doing my presentation in Canva, and I think Canva would be a really good tool to use to do some of this graphic recording. And I didn't mention design thinking, but design thinking is kind of, thinking about I think of this in relation to note taking, thinking about the process that you're taking to plan your meetings, plan your conversations, and how you can change them up, make no assumptions going into it, and then also just changing what you're doing. So having a plan to be flexible with how you're thinking about planning and your process. And those notes will help you do that. It's a part of the reflection and assessment piece there. Okay, how are we on time? Okay, I'm almost done. So we'll leave 10 minutes for questions. And so I hope that I've been an inspiration for you today. I think the practice of facilitation transformed the way we interact by turning conversations into productive collaborations. Hopefully ensures every voice contributes to a shared sense of purpose. So again, hopefully, you're not going into situations where it's a lecture, where you're just being talked at. You're not being considered. There's no compassion in the room by the person who's talking. And so I really hope that the collaborativeness of this, my techniques and my tips here, hopefully have resonated there. So you developing skills in active listening, clarifying, guiding, it can move us from, talking to one another and more meaningful work of building understanding, co-creating solutions within our communities, our workplaces, and families. I want to hopefully, I want to believe that these can help you in talking with your families, your friends, other people outside of outside of our profession, to have kind of conversations and say, hey, this is the goal of this conversation. This is what we're talking about. One thing I didn't talk on or touch on too much, but I do want to highlight is accessibility. Make your locations, your learning objects, anything you share accessible. Make sure that people can read them. They can access the location, the building, if they are if they have mobility issues, different things like that. Consider that a lot. I work with a nonprofit that unfortunately their offices there include stairs and there's no elevator. And so when they meet with folks, I'm always saying you need to find an alternative location outside your offices, because that does not allow someone with mobility issues to attend that meeting. Clarify, repeat. So when you're clarifying statements and you're asking, what did you mean by that? Share an example of what you mean. Repeat, have them repeat and repeat, your statement. And you also, as a facilitator, you repeat your question. If people say, oh, let me think about that, go ahead and repeat the question or repeat the statement that you just made. Assign roles helps to share authority. So you're co-creators, you're collaborating, you are co-facilitating this, and you're empowering other people who may not talk in these conversations. By sharing that authority with them, it really does kind of help inspire people to be a part of the conversation. Model the behavior. So if you're saying that you want people to let others in the room talk, model that behavior. You as a facilitator, step back. You're listening, you're interjecting when you need to. So whenever something may happen, you go, hey, I've been able to talk when or interject or come in when I felt like it was necessary. I hope everyone else can also do that, so that we hear everyone in the room. Follow up. If there is something to follow up, an email, some of those next steps. Reflection is really good, especially self-reflection. How can I improve? Jot down some ideas. I used to actually keep a facilitation journal. So every time I facilitated a conversation, I would go, what worked, what didn't work, what would I change next time? Did I feel like I had any challenges with certain individuals? Keeping a journal and, of course, notes on your own reflection is really good. Assessment evaluation phase. So talking about that with the design thinking and the backwards design, thinking about what can I change next time? How can I do things better? That's always really good. And that goes back to the reflection piece. Set action items and deadlines. Put a timestamp or put a due date on what you're doing. Okay, so I think we're at the end. Yes, so thank you for your time and attention. If you need facilitation help, there's so many resources I've shared here. I've been through them all. I have all these ideas in my head, and I want you to customize this, right? I want you to be able to take these activities, take these tips, and make them your own for yourself, for your communities, for your team, for your colleagues. Take these ideas and make them your own. There's nothing saying you have to follow this activity exactly how it's outlined. It should always be customized to your situation and your scenarios. Okay, I left 9 minutes for questions. What do we have here? So I'm going to try to see if I can see
Yeah, we
everyone.
have no questions so far. So, folks, please feel free to submit them in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yeah. And this could be a conversation. What do you think about the presentation? The kind of things I talked about. Do you feel like you're already doing these things? Maybe they're not effective. Maybe you want some additional ideas on what to do. So definitely feel free to share. If you don't have any questions, you can still share any of your experiences. One of the things with facilitation is being comfortable with silence. If
Mhm.
people need to take time, if there's something that people need to think about, that's also something that, as a facilitator, it may be awkward, but being okay, being comfortable with silences, I think is a skill to learn for sure.
One question that kind of came up in registration a few times was learning how to manage group dynamics, especially when there's a difference in perspective or there's discomfort in a moment, which I think you kind of responded to with the take a pause, let's take 30 seconds and think about it, or just like clarifying what people are saying. Do you have any other kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so having that pre-survey, I think it's really good about learning about the group or the people who's coming into the room. If you can't do that, because that can maybe help shape, where the conversation goes and
Mhm.
kind of how you say, what do we start with, what is in the middle, and what's in the end. And then I think for group dynamics, right? So if you have a lot of differing opinions, I think the main thing is to acknowledge that there are differences in the room and that we want these perspectives so that we can come to a consensus or as much of a consensus as we can. If that is not possible, and also that may not be the goal, consensus building is not always the goal. Maybe just, having people be heard, but I think for people who have differing opinion, different perspectives on certain things, the most important part is to kind of pull those opinions out so they are at least heard. And then in some of those moments, take a pause, put things in the parking lot if you need to discuss later. And that could be an individual discussion or a group discussion, another meeting, another conversation. And then I also think it's really good to say, as the facilitator and then maybe as the manager or the leader, the person who has quote unquote authority in the room, I think it's good again to go back to your framing and say, we're here to do this. This is what I'm hearing people say. This is what I feel like I can do or we can do moving forward. Does everyone agree? Do you disagree? And again, just try to come together on at least what you're doing, even if like the actual details of the solution isn't laid out. And be willing to have another conversation. Be willing to further the session. I know some things, time is of the essence. But I think if this is important enough, if this is something that you really want to get right, be open. You know, if you feel like we might need multiple meetings, we might need multiple conversations, go ahead and schedule those. And if you have to cancel them, you cancel them, right? So just be mindful of what you might need to do for a particular topic. And talk with your team. If you have co-facilitators, I mean, I usually try not to do anything alone. I'm doing this presentation alone, but I try to do everything I do with other people so I can kind of bounce ideas off of people. And I try to co-facilitate too, so that I'm like, what do you think we should do in this situation? Or what is things and prepare as much as you can. If you feel like a topic or something is going to come up in your kind of facilitator guide, your toolkit, if someone says something, try to have some prepared statements as to how you may respond.
Yeah, that's such a good point of like rehearsing or having some of that background info going into it so that you can navigate some of those bumps in the road. We have a question from Talia asking, can you speak more on changing your emotions? I find that most people do not go into situations thinking the best of the other person or people.
Yes. So I am a big proponent of emotional intelligence and being able to sit in a moment and recognize that your immediate reaction to something is your immediate reaction, but that you can take a moment, you can take a minute to go, why am I feeling this way? Why is this bringing up such emotions? Why am I making these assumptions? So I think just having like a good, like, those 30 seconds, 10 seconds with yourself to kind of be reflective of like, huh, um, why am I feeling this way? I also think it's good to inspire that in the other people in the room and say, all right, well, we may have some strong emotions about this, and that's complete. Your feelings, emotions are your own. I won't say they're validated, but they are your own. Again, going back to framing and using language, specific language, and saying, have some self-reflection right now. Why do you feel that way? Are you making assumptions? Is there something about this situation that's bringing up previous and past things? I had, some, what should I say? I experienced bad behavior at my previous institution that I then was very aware of coming into UNC Charlotte that I had to unlearn. And I had to go, these people, this manager is not those people and that manager. And that my strong reaction to this particular situation, when I'm like, oh, this has happened before, I can't believe this is happening again. I have to go, wait a minute, these are new people. This is a new situation. This is a new library. This is a new group of people. I need to not make that assumption. And I think it's good for you to inspire that into other people and say, hey, we may have some strong emotions. People may feel very opinionated or judgmental about this, but let's interrogate. Let's actually unpack what that means. And again, that goes back to maybe sounding a little bit clinical and kind of like, I'm putting these people in therapy, but really it's just kind of hopefully making people think and reflect about what is being said and what is being done in the moment for sure. And then have follow-up conversations. I think it's always good to say, let's talk about this later. Do you want to have a one-on-one or do you want to have a small group conversation? Or again, like, do we want to come back to this? I think when it comes to emotions, sometimes it's good to just remove yourself and come back to it later, so that, it's not so fresh. Because that initial reaction to things can be very strong and you're very like, oh my gosh, on edge. But then when people sit with it and they interrogate it, sometimes it does kind of come back to, okay, let me not make that assumption. Let me not make, accusations or catastrophize things. This may not be that, and I maybe should have like a different mindset, a different perspective about this particular issue.
Steve sharing in the chat. I find myself often working with individuals who are struggling with making a decision, and these tools and techniques are relevant for that, especially the idea of tolerating silence, asking those direct questions like, what do you want?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I really believe in direct questions and making sure that people can articulate or communicate what they mean. So again, going back to like, can you give me an example of what you're talking about? Or, what are our goals coming out of here? What are our next steps? Do we all agree with these? I think that is so important to be transparent, open, direct so that everybody's on the same page. And maybe everybody's not on the same page, but they heard the same thing and it's being recorded in the notes. It's being recorded in whatever follow-up mechanism we're using, and in our next steps in our solution so that everybody knows this is what was decided. There's no ambiguity, there's no confusion. And if there is confusion, address it at some point, and hopefully that person will bring that to you. And say, if you individually want to talk about this, leave the door open. Leave the door open. I kind of said this with outreach. Outreach is an ongoing relationship, it's a partnership. And anytime you have these conversations, where you're facilitating, you're leading, be open to having the conversation over and over. I mean, it depends on the scenario, the situation, of course, but leaving that door open also helps people who may not have spoke up in the group discussion. So yeah, and just be willing to talk about it later. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point of kind of offering something afterwards, because oftentimes your folks who might be a little bit quieter are going to take you up on that offer of one-on-one conversation, which is great.
Mhm.
Angel, thank you so much food for thought. I can't wait to dig into all the links. I was taking copious notes as you were leading this webinar. But folks, keep an eye out for an email from me tomorrow afternoon with the slides, a feedback survey. In that feedback survey, please let me know future topics for the NC Live training program, and the recording as well will be available in that email. But I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday and hopefully end of semester for our academic library folks. Um, Prep for summer reading for our public library folks on this webinar today, but hope you all have a great rest of your Tuesday. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Angel. Take care, y'all.